We came into the performance with very little sense of what the stories were about, and yet I think all of us felt as though we were at some point overcome with emotions.
It was amazing. It was completely different. If you're kind of used to Western performance traditions, seeing something like that is so, it feels so alien, but it's so fascinating.
For me, it's been really helpful to think from the inside of what it's like to be a performer in that space, what it's like to be an audience member in that space.
I'm Rory Loughnane. I'm a reader in early modern studies at the University of Kent, and I'm principal investigator for this AHRC ESRC project, Performance, Memory and Cultural Heritage in the UK and Japan. The idea behind the project was that we would have one set of workshops in Canterbury and London, and a second set of workshops back in Issei and Kyoto. In 2019, June 2019, a group of colleagues from皇學館 University came over to Canterbury, and they were hosted on campus, and we did a series of workshops in London, and then we went to Faversham on the second day, and we looked at sites associated with performance, such as the Thomas Arden's home, which inspired the murder at that home inspired the play Arden of Faversham. And then a group of colleagues from Kent travelled over to Issei, where we again did a series of workshops with colleagues at皇學館, and then we travelled from Issei to Kyoto for a couple of days, and then went to Tokyo for a few days to try and round out our experiences.
Actually, seeing it in situ allowed us to understand it in a Japanese context, and to see it alongside a lot of the museum exhibits and some of the evidence for early day life and practice, and the spatial configurations within which it was taking place.
We were interested in performance in not only stage performance, but also a broader sense of cultural performativity. And one of the things that was particularly striking to us in our comparative analysis was the bridging of the secular with the sacred, or vice versa, the sacred with the secular. So we did focus on, in Japan, no performances and kabuki performances, but we were also interested in religious rituals and how they have an element of performativity also.
My name is Christopher Mayo, and I'm a professor at皇學館 University. I teach Japanese history, Japanese culture, and English language classes. I think there are a lot of religious elements involved in our performance culture that we presented. Some of them really explicitly religious because they're part of religious rituals, but also some that maybe weren't obviously religious, at least on the surface. And I think a lot of people, it still resonates today. So a lot of these rituals and performances that we included in our part of the project, I think a lot of them would have been easily recognizable to people 100, 200, 300 years ago, and as much part of daily culture.
Certainly the work that we saw, particularly the kabuki and the no theatre we've just been looking at, the audience are very familiar with the forms that they're going to see, with the costumes, with the roles. It's all very structured, and they recognise symbols, they recognise gestures. So there's a way in which the audience are complicit in the performance.
それに対する皆様方のコメントであるとか、 質問などいただきまして、非常に多くの刺激をいただき、学ばせていただくことがとてもたくさんありました。今後ともよろしくお願い申し上げます。
Your visit are very honor of us. We always welcome you to Japan.
On the second day of our trip in the UK, we went to the Arden family home.
We travelled down Abbey Street until we got to the home of Thomas Arden, whose murder in 1551 inspired the play Arden of Faversham.
And it was really amazing to be at the place upon which the play was based and then to actually enact the play.
We did a performance workshop in the garden at the back of Thomas Arden's house, which still stands, where his body was dragged through in the context of the play, and we did several readings from that play.
I think for us, it was kind of exciting to go to the place that was so directly connected to it and just read out loud and have a kind of impromptu performance. And I don't think I can imagine that happening in Japan.
What's quite interesting with contemporary Japanese performance, that there is this legacy and this documentation of how it should be done. There isn't really that legacy in medieval culture. We have to work from all sorts of other sources, from stained glass windows and manuscript illuminations and what's actually written in the text, or the odd stray comment in records, to kind of piece that together.
So one of the ways in which historical fiction functions is to think about what we recognise in the past and how we might see ourselves there and how we might understand that people are people. But it's also about recognising what is alien and unfamiliar and what we don't know and can't know. Something that I enjoy as a writer very much is the way in which English isn't very precious about what counts as English, so we co-opt words from Latin. With an Anglo-Saxon language, we'll steal from any language. You can see in play texts where an author is not just thinking about the meaning of words, but on how they sound on the stage.
On a macro level, a really large level, I think a lot of the plays and a lot of the performances, the prayers, for example, share similar maybe desires. Some of the things that the people making the prayers wanted, some of the people listening to them wanted to hear, those sorts of things. So I think, in terms of religious experience and so forth, you could find a lot of similarities.
He hardly prays some occasions short of Taylor's spur. I dare swear, though, he is no hypocrite, but prays from his heart.
I think what we've seen in these two different cultures is how performance sits within a culture, what it's trying to say about that culture, how it's processing for its audiences and its actors, the big important issues that they're dealing with in that culture.
Even though early modern English performance culture might be entirely disconnected from the performance tradition, there are still affinities, global affinities, in the sort of entertainment, in the loosest term of the word, in either sacred or secular ritualized movements and practices, and that we can see affinity in correspondences at a global level as opposed to just at a national level. So the four key themes that we identified moving into this project were around the transmission of these texts, whether sacred or secular performance texts.
Often we think, for example, from medieval perspective, we think that medieval performances have no bearing on the now, and they have no influence on the performance cultures that came past. But actually they did, because they influenced the commercial theatre of Shakespeare. They influenced, therefore, the performances of later generations. So there is this legacy, and I think to ignore that is to ignore, an important part of what makes humans humans.
So it's like start o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning, and you're there till 9 o'clock at night.
Oh, what have I learned? Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've been exposed to a lot of different ideas and a lot of knowledge that I would have never encountered without this project. So I think for me that was especially useful. But I think from my own personal research, it was really nice to see my colleagues being able to interact with their counterparts at Kent and other universities as well, and share their ideas and some of their research methodologies and so forth with others. And you could see in the reactions, I think on both sides, that they had new ideas and they were being stimulated by the questions that they wouldn't have gotten, I think, in a from a domestic audience.
Through this project, I learned three things. The first is the effectiveness of experiential workshops for learning about different cultures. The second is that with great sensitivity and high performance skills like those of the professors at the University of Kent, such workshops would not be that difficult. Lastly, by looking at my own culture from the different perspectives of the other cultures, I have gained a deeper understanding of my own culture.
I think the endless reforming and re-engaging with the past, that's what gives us our shared cultural understanding, isn't it? And the more multicultural we become, the more multi-generational we become, the more important that ability to revisit, to reinterpret, to interrogate is. And I think it's a vital part of the way in which we're going to function as communities as we get bigger.
Your hand, Leonardo, we will go together.